Pearl Harbor in World War II, 1941 to 1945. If you enjoy calm storytelling, please subscribe and like the video to help the channel grow. The camera opens on the soft blue of a Hawaiian morning. It is Sunday, December 7, 1941. At Pearl Harbor, sailors are waking, flags are being run up masts, and the harbor water is calm enough to borrow the colors of the sky. Battleships Oklahoma, West Virginia, California, Nevada, Arizona, lie at anchor. Onshore, the band at Ford Island is preparing for a routine performance. In homes, radios murmur breakfast music and church bells are getting ready to ring. It looks like any quiet day. Then a small shape appears in the distance, followed by many more. Engines roar. The sun flashes off wings that are not American. At 7:55 a.m., sirens erupt. Bombers and torpedo planes of the Imperial Japanese Navy sweep in low and fast. The first explosions kick the harbor as if it were a drum. Arizona takes a bomb through her forward magazine. In a single instant she breaks with a blast that blooms like a fire flower. Oklahoma rolls as torpedoes bite. Nevada tries to make for the channel, smoke pouring from her. On the airfields, rows of planes are parked wingtip to wingtip, they burn in neat lines. Sailors sprint, some in bare feet, some with fire hoses, some hauling ammunition along decks already slick with oil and water. From shore, people watch through windows and from lawns, disbelieving, as dark specks peel off from the main waves and release more bombs. The attack lasts about 2 hours, arriving in 2 major waves. By the time the planes turn for home, more than 2,400 Americans are dead, many more wounded, and the Pacific Fleet is a deep wound of smoke. The harbor is choked with debris and grief. Yet even here, there are scenes of resolve, men forming bucket brigades, medics transforming mess halls into hospitals, chaplains praying over the wounded, sailors leaping into the harbor to rescue shipmates. The camera lingers on a flag that still flies above a listing deck. It is torn but standing. Back in Washington, D.C., the news arrives with the shock of an open door and a winter wind. President Franklin D. Roosevelt asks his staff for the latest dispatches and dictates a short speech. The next day, December 8, he addresses Congress and the nation. His words are careful and clear, a date which will live in infamy. Congress declares war on Japan with overwhelming support. A few days later, Germany and Italy declare war on the United States, and Congress answers in kind. A regional war has become a global one. The country changes almost overnight. The camera pulls back from Hawaii and crosses a world that is already on fire. In Europe, Nazi Germany has overrun Poland and France and is hammering Britain from the air. In the east, it has invaded the Soviet Union and is driving toward the Volga and the Caucasus. In Asia, Japan has occupied vast stretches of China and Southeast Asia. The oceans themselves feel like chessboards, with fleets and convoys moving in tense patterns. At home, the United States now moves with the speed of a nation suddenly awake. Factories become arsenals. Automobile plants retool to produce tanks and aircraft. Shipyards learn to launch a Liberty ship in weeks instead of months. The War Production Board sets quotas for steel and rubber. The Office of Price Administration introduces ration books for sugar, gasoline, and meat. Scrap drives turn pots, pans, and paper into raw material. Civilians plant victory gardens, buy war bonds, and train as air raid wardens. The workforce changes shape. Millions of women enter factories and offices, their hair tied in scarves, their hands steady on drill presses and rivet guns. Rosie the Riveter becomes an icon. not just a poster. The draft swells the armed forces, and volunteers flood recruiting offices. Training camps spring up across the country: Georgia red clay, California desert, Carolina pine. The rhythm of marching feet becomes the metronome of a new national life. On trains, men in olive drab and navy blue lean out windows, calling to families on platforms. In pockets, there are snapshots and folded letters. In duffel bags, there are socks, ration biscuits, and the weight of what is about to happen. The first months are hard. In the Pacific, Japan moves quickly, capturing Guam and Wake Island, then sweeping through the Philippines. American and Filipino forces fight stubbornly on the Bataan Peninsula and Corregidor Island, short on food and medicine, long on courage. When Bataan falls in April 1942, prisoners are forced on a brutal march that the world will later know as the Bataan Death March. Corregidor holds a little longer, then too is overwhelmed. The news is bitter. It makes headlines and hardens resolve. At sea, the story begins to change. In May 1942, carriers from the United States and Japan clash in the Coral Sea. Neither fleet's ships see the other directly, a new kind of battle fought largely by aircraft, but the outcome matters. Japan's advance toward Port Moresby is halted. A month later, at Midway, American cryptanalysts' quiet work pays off. They have broken parts of the Japanese naval code and know where the enemy plans to strike. In a few dramatic minutes, dive bombers find Japanese carriers with their decks crowded by fueled planes and open gasoline lines. 4 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, are lost. The balance in the Pacific tilts. On the islands and in the jungles, the war is a muddy, hungry grind. Marines land on Guadalcanal in August 1942 to seize an airfield that could control vital sea lanes. The campaign is 6 months of nights filled with the engines of Japanese destroyers, of close combat under rain and palm shadows, of supply shortages and malaria. When it ends, the United States holds the island. The strategy that follows is island hopping: bypass heavily fortified islands, seize airfields on others, and move step by step toward Japan. New Guinea, the Solomons, the Gilberts, the Marshalls, the Marianas, each becomes a chapter written in coral and blood. Across the world, the European and North African theaters pulse with their own energy. Before America joined, Britain had stood nearly alone in Europe. Now, new divisions, ships, and aircraft arrive. The first major American offensive on the European side is Operation Torch, the November 1942 landings in North Africa. Troops come ashore in Morocco and Algeria, some resistance is light, some sharp, but the momentum carries forward. Soon the Allies press eastward toward Tunisia, learning lessons, sometimes harsh ones, about logistics, combined arms, and the desert itself. By May 1943, the Axis armies in North Africa surrender. The door to the Mediterranean is open. From there, the Allies strike Sicily in July 1943 and mainland Italy in September. The Italian campaign is a ladder of mountains and rivers. Names like Monte Cassino, Anzio, and the Gothic Line mark steps that cost dearly. The fighting here pulls German divisions south, away from the French coast, and teaches commanders how to coordinate naval fire, air power, and infantry in difficult terrain. Civilians suffer under bombardment and occupation, and many flee on foot with what they can carry. In villages, church bells ring for weddings and funerals on the same afternoon. War compresses life. In the air, bombers cross night and day. The U.S. 8th Air Force pounds factories, rail yards, and oil fields by daylight while the Royal Air Force strikes by night. Crews climb into B-17s and B-24s knowing the flak will be heavy and the fighters will be waiting. Many aircraft do not return. Yet over time, escort fighters with longer range, P-51 Mustangs most famously, can shepherd bombers deep into Germany. Air superiority, bought at terrible cost, will be essential for what comes next. Back in the United States, the home front story is more than production numbers. It is also about justice and contradiction. After Pearl Harbor, more than 110,000 Japanese Americans, most of them citizens, are forced from their West Coast homes and sent to incarceration camps under Executive Order 9066. Families lose businesses, houses, heirlooms. They bring what they can carry and live for years behind barbed wire. At the same time, thousands of Japanese Americans volunteer for service. The 100th Infantry Battalion/442 ND Regimental Combat Team fights with remarkable valor in Europe and becomes one of the most highly decorated units of its size in U.S. history. African American Americans serve in segregated units while fighting for a double V victory abroad and victory over discrimination at home. The Tuskegee Airmen fly fighter escorts with skill and courage. Black sailors, soldiers, and Marines serve from engine rooms to beachheads. Navajo code talkers in the Pacific use their language to create a code the enemy cannot break, guiding artillery and aircraft with a precision that saves lives. Women wear uniforms as nurses, weather forecasters, radio operators, and ferry pilots, while millions more keep the war economy moving. The nation is imperfect, yet it is changing under the pressure of necessity and the insistence of citizens who demand to be counted. In 1944, the war's tempo accelerates. In the Pacific, the capture of the Marianas, Saipan, Tinian, Guam, puts American B-29 bombers within range of Japan's home islands. Airfields sprout from coral and crushed lava. At sea, carrier task forces now cross the Pacific as mobile storms, striking with waves of aircraft and covered by floating screens of anti-aircraft guns and radar. In June, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot sees Japanese naval aviation smashed in a day of fierce aerial combat. The power of American industry and training is on full display. In Europe, the largest amphibious invasion in history forms up across southern England. It has taken months of preparation, maps drawn from every scrap of information, harbors crammed with ships, supply dumps stacked to the horizon. The target is Normandy, on the northern coast of France. D-Day, June 6, 1944, begins in the dark. Paratroopers drop behind enemy lines to seize bridges and crossroads. At dawn, thousands of landing craft move toward beaches with code names: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, Sword. The sea is choppy. The German defenses are strong. At Omaha, the first waves are torn apart by fire, officers and sergeants rally survivors, and by midday they are off the sand and climbing the bluffs. By nightfall, the Allies have a foothold. It is not yet victory, but it is the open door to it. Through the summer and fall, the Allies push inward, hedgerows first, then open country. Paris is liberated in August. In the east, the Soviet Union crushes German armies and rolls toward Poland and beyond. The Nazi regime, cornered, turns more savage. The world learns more of the Holocaust as camps are overrun. Ghettos emptied, families destroyed, 6 million Jews murdered, along with millions of others, Roma, Poles, Soviet prisoners, disabled people, political dissidents, gay men, and many more. Soldiers who open the camps will never forget what they see: and the camera of history will never close on that evidence. In December 1944, Germany launches a last desperate offensive in the Ardennes forest, hoping to split Allied lines and force a separate peace. Snow falls, fog lingers, and the Battle of the Bulge becomes a freezing, chaotic struggle. In towns like Bastogne, American units hold out while surrounded, refusing to yield. The skies clear, Allied aircraft return, the bulge is flattened. By spring 1945, the Allies cross the Rhine into Germany. In April, American and Soviet troops meet at the Elbe River, a handshake bridging languages and ideologies. Adolf Hitler commits suicide in his bunker as Soviet troops close on Berlin. On May 8, 1945, Europe celebrates V.E. Day, Victory in Europe. Crowds fill streets from London to New York. Church bells ring, factory whistles blow, strangers embrace. The war, however, is not over. Across the Pacific, Japanese forces still fight with fierce persistence. The battles grow bloodier as the Allies approach the home islands. On Iwo Jima in early 1945, Marines advance yard by yard over black volcanic sand under dense fire. The flag raising on Mount Suribachi is photographed and becomes an enduring symbol, but the island only yields after weeks of combat and heavy losses on both sides. In April, the invasion of Okinawa begins. Civilians are caught in the middle, and the fighting is a storm that seems without end: artillery, cave-by-cave clearing, mass kamikaze attacks against the fleet. The cost is staggering. In the air, B-29s bomb Japan's industrial cities. At first they fly high and aim at factories, later, switching tactics, they attack at lower altitudes with incendiaries, firestorms that turn city blocks into ash. The aim is to crush the capacity and will to fight, but the human toll is enormous. Every person lost is a whole world. In hidden sites in the American Southwest and at laboratories across the country, a separate story has been unfolding: the Manhattan Project. Scientists and engineers, refugees from fascism, American researchers, military officers, work under intense secrecy to unlock the energy within the atom. In July 1945, in the New Mexico desert, the first atomic device explodes with a light that makes shadows of mountains. The choice moves from theory to policy. President Harry S. Truman, who took office after Roosevelt's death in April, faces a terrible decision: how to end the war quickly and save American and Allied lives from the predicted losses of an invasion, while confronting the moral meaning of a weapon unlike any before. Diplomacy continues. At the Potsdam Conference, the Allies demand Japan's unconditional surrender. The Japanese government debates, but agreement does not come. On August 6, 1945, a B-29 named Enola Gay drops an atomic bomb over Hiroshima. A city becomes a wound in a second: shock, fire, radiation, silence. 3 days later, with surrender still uncertain and the Soviet Union now attacking Japanese forces in Manchuria, a second bomb falls on Nagasaki. The devastation is beyond easy description. On August 15, Emperor Hirohito announces Japan's acceptance of surrender terms. V.J. Day, Victory over Japan, brings people into the streets again. Sailors kiss nurses in Times Square. Church bells and temple bells ring across the world. In Tokyo Bay on September 2, 1945, aboard the battleship USS Missouri, representatives sign the formal surrender documents. The war is over. The camera, which has spent years following fire and steel, now finds quieter scenes. In Europe and Asia, displaced persons search for family. Survivors of camps look for names on lists tacked to walls. Cities begin the long work of clearing rubble, rebuilding bridges, reopening schools. In the United States, trains pull into stations carrying home soldiers with duffel bags and a look in their eyes that is both old and young. Some have seen 3 continents, some carry scars visible and not. They step onto platforms and into lives that will need to be rethreaded. The war leaves marks on policy and daily habit. The United Nations is founded in the hope that nations can talk before they shoot, that collective security can prevent the next catastrophe. The GI Bill offers education and loans to veterans, reshaping the American middle class and the map of suburbs. Science will not return to a small room. Radar, antibiotics, jet engines, rockets, and computing will pour into civilian life. The economy, tuned by war production, leaps into peacetime demand, refrigerators, cars, houses, while the world rebuilds. Yet shadows remain. The atomic age has begun, and with it a new, uneasy balance. The Cold War is already in the wings. The cost of the war is almost beyond counting. More than 400,000 Americans die in service, millions are wounded. Worldwide, the loss is many tens of millions, soldiers and civilians, the known and the unnamed. The Holocaust is a wound on history that demands remembrance and justice. In Asia, cities and villages hold funerals for years. In the Pacific atolls where fleets clashed, coral reefs still cradle metal skeletons. Memory does not rust, it returns whenever a veteran hears a certain engine note, whenever a family opens a trunk and finds a uniform or a letter with edges gone soft. And yet, from the ashes, there is also proof of what people can do together. The war was not won by any single act of heroism, though there were many, but by countless acts linked across oceans, a machinist in Detroit cutting a perfect gear, a code breaker in a quiet room, a nurse folding a blanket just so, a Marine crawling forward with a flamethrower, a pilot holding formation, a schoolchild buying a 10-cent war stamp, a farmer loading wheat, an engineer designing a bridge that can be built in a day, a teacher explaining a map to a class that has pins across the world. The story is immense, but it fits in the small spaces of human effort. In later years, many veterans do not speak much about what they saw. When they do, their stories are often simple. A buddy who shared a can of peaches. A chaplain who said a prayer that sounded like home. A ship that felt like a town. A beach that looked quiet from a distance and was not. For them, the war is not a textbook diagram, it is the weight of a pack, the smell of oil and rope, the taste of powdered eggs, the sound of a friend's laugh on a cold morning. It is also the knowledge that history can turn in one day, on one harbor, and that what people do after that day matters. The film fades to black and then brightens on a final sequence, the memorial at Pearl Harbor, white and still over the remains of the Arizona, the beaches of Normandy, crossed now by families with picnic baskets, the green slope of a quiet field in Pennsylvania where workers once trained, the streets of Tokyo and Berlin, rebuilt and busy, the halls of the United Nations, where arguments are loud but the guns, at least for now, are elsewhere. Names are read on Veterans Days. Flags are folded and handed to families. Children study maps in classrooms that are warm and well lit. The world is not perfect. It is not safe forever. But it is here, changed by those years, and held together by the memory of what was required to rescue it. Pearl Harbor begins the American chapter of the war with fire and smoke. The years that follow bring discipline, invention, and sacrifice on a national scale. From the first panicked moments on decks in Hawaii to the quiet signing aboard Missouri, from deserts to forests to islands where the surf never stops, the path is long and costly. What carried a free people through was not only strength of arms but the belief that liberty is worth defending and that nations can, when tested, link their strength to lift a future out of ruin. The light that returns at the end of this story is not the light of naive peace, it is the steady brightness of a world rebuilt, watched over by those who remember how quickly morning can darken, and how powerfully it can brighten again.